Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, a very special guest this week as we continue on with a full week of sci-fi. And of course, he is from the Star Wars franchise. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest this week, Mr. Tim Donaldson. Tim, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
It's great to have you here. And, you have a unique situation. It's a great story, really. Obviously, a child actor in the Star Wars franchise. You were one of the legendary Jawa figures. George Lucas chose 8 children, and you were one of them at only 5 years old. Why don't you tell us that whole story, how that came about, and what that experience was like?
Yeah, it's funny that you say, I was a child actor. I had no aspirations to be such, but here we are back in January of 1977. I was 5 years old at the time, and this gentleman and his group came into my little schoolhouse there in Death Valley. We lived there because my parents were National Park Service, and he said that he was filming a movie and that he needed some extras for some scenes, and asked if he could essentially borrow 8 kids for a couple of days of filming. And at the time, 1977, this is a different world, right? And all the parents just said, "Yeah, absolutely, no problem. Feel free." And so to start things off, George was the gentleman, George Lucas, and I know that Gary Kurtz was there as well. I'm not sure who else was present from Lucasfilms, but they had done a vast majority of their filming in Tunisia, and that's where, at that time, all the Jawa scenes had been filmed, and so they when they came back from Tunisia. Some of that, it's my understanding that some of the film had been destroyed. Either that, or when he was doing his final cut, he just decided that he needed some fill-in scenes, or maybe it was a combination of the both. But so we were filming scenes to connect with scenes that had already been done in Africa. So our figures, our characters, were already established and in the can, and we had to match those. So our audition for this was, they lined us all up and they measured us. And there were very specific measurements that we needed to, because we had to match our Tunisia counterparts. And so we all stood there in line, had no idea why. They measured us, and I was one of the lucky 8 that was chosen to do this. And at the time, George Lucas really wasn't, anybody big. Star Wars was completely unknown to the, at that time, Sci-Fi was a completely different ball of wax. If you look back at some of the early shows, everything's pristine, everything worked. Like every time they pushed the button, it worked, right? Yeah. And here George Lucas had this crew, and our costumes were just rags, and a lot of the characters, the Tusken Raiders, were in rags, and they had Margie the elephant there, and she was in rags and just rough looking, and the land speeder was there, and it was beat up and shot and missing parts, and C-3PO was there, and he had a silver leg when he was a gold robot, and so this idea around this film within the parents and the teachers was that it just wasn't going to be anything, some second rate B grade sci-fi film. I think that's how my mom wrote to my grandmother, you
Yeah.
know, that was the film I was in. So, um, so we were tasked to work for a couple of days. The first day I remember, was mostly um, getting set in costumes and getting that all organized. And I remember doing that down at a local hotel there in Death Valley. And we got ready for the filming, and then they took us out into the desert for our shoots. And there's a few different ones, but the main one is when R2D2 is traveling through Jawa Canyon in the beginning of the film, and the Jawas jump out from hiding and shoot him, and he falls over, and we run out and pick him up and carry him to the sandcrawler. And then there's a few other scenes in there where we're peeking around corners, rocks are falling, stuff like that. That was filmed in Death Valley. Some of it was filmed in Tunisia as well. The scenes kind of jump back and forth. There's the famous Jawa rock that's in Tunisia, but surrounding that is us. And at the time, well, for the film, I was the youngest cast member in all of Star Wars at 5 years old. Most of the other kids were a little bit older. Believe Joe Weber was 6 at the time. Andrea Wickman Miller, she was 7. Most of them were second graders, and I was in kindergarten at the time.
Wow.
So that kind of starts it off. That's how it began. It was who knew at that time. George Lucas paid us a whopping $25 in cash. We didn't even get a check from him, which is kind of funny. At least we could have had maybe a canceled check or something from Lucasfilm, but we were paid in cash, and and we went on about our merry way. And I guess we were pretty excited as kids when we first got back to school, and our teacher sat us down and said, slow your roll here. The thing's not even gonna make the box office, right?
Yeah. So, being at that age, such a young age 5, you're in kindergarten, what was the attention span like? Like, how were you perceiving this? Did you fully understand what you were involved in exactly?
Oh, not even close. To be fair, at that time, I'm not even sure I'd seen a movie. Death Valley is a very, very remote place, and it still is. I don't even recall like going to a movie theater, and I was a pretty active little kid. I ran around the canyons of Death Valley on my own all the time, and just like I was probably pretty feral, to be honest. And I can only imagine that for George and company, it must have just been herding cats. Like it must have been insane, because none of us had any aspirations of being in films. None of us pursued any kind of career like that ever. So, it's just, it just, I just, kind of did what they told me to do, put on your robe and run here and run there and pick this up and drop that and, go about our business. And yeah, it must have been insanity. Like that guy must have been pulling his hair out, like
Right.
literally.
And you may not remember because you were so young, but do you remember any of the interactions between yourself and George Lucas?
Yeah, there's one very particular area that I remember, and the R2D2 that we were carrying, and I know they had several different ones, but the one in particular that we were carrying was one of the Kenny Baker R2D2. So it was one that was designed for him to get in the robot and move around, and it was probably the lightest. The other one, some of the other ones had some robotics in it and stuff like that, but um, it was not designed to be carried on its side. It was meant to be vertical all the time, and we had this really really bad problem. We'd start carrying the robot R2D2, and his head would fall off.
Oh,
And like I remember George just being irate. They could not get that R2D2's head to stay on, and if my memory serves me correct, which I believe it does, they ended up using tape around the seam of his head. And in the early rendition of the film, you could actually notice either a discolored, off color stripe around the base of his head. It's later since been corrected with the new version that came out in '96. But yeah, I remember there was that, and there was, I think you could see a tennis shoe at one point when we were running around. And I don't remember whose tennis shoe it was, whether it was mine or not. But I remember in the film, like in the early rendition, there was a few mistakes that if you were really watching, you could pick up on.
Now, famously, there was a photo taken on set, obviously off camera, and it was you in your Jawa attire with your face, fully exposed. Your sister, of all people, took the photo, and she was disappointed, I guess, because she didn't quite make the cut because of her height. And like
Right.
you said, you had to be an exact height. Why don't you just kind of tell us about that story right there?
Yeah, so my sister was 2 years older. She was in second grade, a classmate of Andrea Wickman. And the funny thing is I remember, thinking back to when you were a kid and you're getting stood up against the wall. Your mom's got her marks on the kitchen door frame, and every time you get measured, you just stand up nice and straight, and tall as you can, maybe cheat a little. And my sister remembers very specifically being 1/2 inch too tall. And so to be honest, she's a little upset about it to this day. To be a part of the greatest franchise ever, like she missed it by literally a 1/2 inch. So she wasn't a part of the actual filming, but as a condition for me to go, my mom insisted that she go along as my chaperone, which is just, makes tons of sense. Let's have a 7-year-old chaperone a 5-year-old. Like that's
Right.
going to work out perfect. And and so my mom said, make sure you take the camera, and it was the family camera. And if you remember it, when it was one of those old Kodak 110 cameras that had the film cassette, and they were not known to take good pictures. And my sister took one picture the entire day, and it was me standing there in my Jawa costume with my face visible. And it's just such a treasure to have today, because so many of the faceless characters within Star Wars don't have any pictures of themselves on set. So it's just an absolute treasure to have. And it's kind of funny. There's a few pictures out on the internet of us kids being tended to by different adults. And there's one picture that clearly shows my sister. She's wearing bright red corduroy pants and shirt, and it's pretty funny because I always laugh that hey, you're still part of the franchise, like
It's a great
behind
story.
it. Yeah.
Now, another thing, when it comes to, obviously you said, the budget's low. It's the very first film for them. They don't know if this is going to take off or not. So, like you said, a lot of the costumes are literally just rags. The Jawas, the Tusken Raiders, so you're in Death Valley. It's got to be hot. What is it like wearing something like that? Did it bother you, or didn't really, wasn't too thick?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I owned a coat Like literally, I lived in Death Valley, like one of the hottest places in North America, and I just don't believe. I remember as a kid, like I wear shorts. Like my mom's like, I couldn't even keep a shirt on you. Like I was pretty feral as a kid. But it was January, so it's not blazing middle of the summer, thank goodness. But I do remember those costumes were just so big and so heavy. And like I said, I probably didn't even own a coat, and to actually move around in this thing was just extremely cumbersome. And like you look at, there's a scene of me running at one point. It's one of the, excuse me, got an itch. It's one of the pictures that I like to sign. It's just, kind of the epic of the Jawa running and in this huge thing. And I remember it just being so heavy and clumsy and like, well, if you really want me to run, let me take this thing off and I'll show you how fast I am, So it was pretty bad. It was horrible. The hoods that we wore had the lights down low, and they were incandescents, right? So they didn't have LEDs back then,
Wow.
And I remember those were pretty hot, and then we could see out here. And a lot of us, like, I think we were complaining about it enough that they're like, fine, don't wear the hoods all the time. Just in a few scenes you need to wear them. So there's a lot of the scenes like they're shot from the side, so you can't see our faces at all.
Oh, okay.
And then those had, I remember those big Rayovac 9-volt batteries. They were huge, and we had to wear that in a pack on our back, and the gloves, and it was just unnatural for us kids there in Death Valley to have all this gear. If we lived in way up north in Canada, like it would have been perfectly normal. Like, oh yeah, I put this stuff on every year. But for us, it was just, very cumbersome. That's why we run like fools.
And as any child would, you're 5 years old, you find yourself, kind of touching some of the props, trying on some of the things. You happen to try on the Tusken Raider helmet, and you held the weapon. Tell us about that experience or any
Oh
memory.
yeah. As a kid, I just, I was enamored with stuff, especially guns. Like that was cool. We played cops and robbers, we cowboys and Indians and all that as kids. And to have this very large, rifle, was pretty cool. I remember trying that on and being fascinated by that helmet that the Tusken Raiders wore. It was huge on me, but like I was like, oh, I could see through these little tiny holes, and that was kind of fun. And getting to see Margie the elephant there, like that was amazing. Like, oh my God, there's an elephant in Death Valley. This is cool,
Yeah. And, 8 of you were there as far as the children go, and only 3 have been discovered all these years later with
Yeah.
social media and everything that's out there. It's surprising that nobody else has kind of come forward.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Claire Bolin passed away in 2020. We do know that. There's a few others that have decided they kind of live recluse type lifestyles, and they've chosen to maintain that. And then there's just a few that we just have no idea what happened to them. Nobody stays in Death Valley for very long. It just kind of, you blow in and you blow out. My parents were in the Park Service. Joe Weber's parents were in the Park Service. Andrea Wickman's parents, her stepdad was an artist. Or no, I'm sorry, her dad was an artist, and her stepmom worked at the school, I think, just to occupy time. But I think we left, somewhere in 1979, and to be honest, I didn't go back until I think it was 2016 when I went back to Death Valley and walked around the park. I ended up. This is kind of a funny story. I don't know if you know this one, but it's how I was discovered by autograph collectors. I went back to Death Valley And I went into the visitor center because, I don't remember where those scenes were. Like, I was so young. And I walked in and I asked the visitor center staff where the Star Wars scenes were. And they were kind of, oh, geez, another one, right? Like, and they're like, well, why do you want to know? And I said, well, I was one of the school kids that was in the movie as a Jawa, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is fantastic!" And they're like, "We need to get our historian. Can you wait around a little bit while we get our historian?" And so the historian, she came out and she just had some questions about it, some basics about it. She wanted to fill in some gaps. They knew some stuff they didn't know. But to have a firsthand witness was a pretty special thing. I thought nothing of it, and um, we'll get into this story a little bit later. But when the autograph collectors came, my very first time to have them sign, I'm like, after all this time, like how did you come up with this? Like, and they said, well, you're in the archives. And initially, I thought like Lucasfilm archives, like somebody had made their way into that vault of amazingness, and found my name and in Lucasfilm, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But as it turns out, it was um, Obama, President Obama's White House archives in the Library of Congress. There is there's an article, and if you search it, it's from Forrest Gump to Star Wars, how Hollywood has used the national parks or something like that. So if you do a Google search of Forrest Gump, Star Wars, Obama White House archives, and you scroll down, there's my silly mug.
Wow.
Right in the Obama White House archives. Yeah. So that was that's where it all started. Again, like the second version of this story, chapter 2 started right there by my wife and I going to Death Valley and just asking where these scenes were. So
Yeah.
that was pretty epic.
And speaking of chapter 2, and another part of this chapter, 41 years exactly after the filming of Star Wars, you were a part of your very first Comic-Con. Why don't you tell us, all about that Comic-Con, the experience meeting fans for the first time in that atmosphere, and where that Comic-Con was, which one it was?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll just back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
So here we are in 2017, and to be perfectly honest, this is not a story that I told to very many people.
Oh.
As a kid, I would tell people that I was in Star Wars, and they would be like, "Oh, are you in the credits?" And no, if you look at the credits, like there's nobody in the credits back then. It was the main actors, and that was it. And now, boy, if you do a film, like everybody is listed in the credits. Like,
Yeah.
holy smokes! I mean, my sister would have been listed in the credits
Yeah.
for gosh sakes. So yeah, exactly. So over time, I just kind of quit telling the story. And I just went on about my life. And of course, it was always precious to me. I always knew, and people close to me, I would tell, and they would ask if I was in the credits, and I'd be like, no. And so, here Facebook came around. I think I jumped onto that platform probably around 2009 or something like that, and it started to where eventually I would put up my Jawa picture, just for me and friends, on May the 4th, and that was just kind of something I would do, and then I'd take it down as a profile picture. And so that was part of the investigation process. So this gentleman by the name of AJ Nesselrod discovered me and the story of the 8 Jawas in the Obama White House archives. And here these autograph collectors are, and this is, something I've seen. I had no idea that this world existed. I really had none. And these individuals that have sought out every autograph from anybody that was involved in the film to complete these, especially these posters, to find out there's 8 that they didn't even know about was just, mind blowing to them. And they're like, oh my gosh, we have to find these. So my name was listed in the archives. They started doing a Facebook search, and what do you know? This guy from Northern California puts a Jawa picture up on May the 4th every year. Could it be, So they contacted me through Facebook, and to be perfectly fair, I blew them off for a long time. I'm like, I remember talking to my wife about this. I'm like, this has got to be a scam. These guys say they want to get my autograph. They want to pay me money. I'm like, no way. This can't be true. And I kept pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off. And so eventually I broke down, and they ended up coming. We ended up meeting here at the house, and it was this gentleman, AJ Nesselrod, and another individual by the name of Steve Grad. And Steve Grad has a little bit of notoriety, or he's a little bit famous from the show Pawn Stars. He does the autograph verifications when they have that sort of thing.
I thought I knew that name.
What's that?
I thought I knew that name. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he comes to the house, and it was kind of funny. He's like, don't you know who I am? And I'm like, nope. But anyway, now I do. I'm like, oh man, Steve's a great friend now. And so anyway, we sat in our dining room here, and they just kept, pushing autograph, pictures for me to sign. And I actually made, I think it was like 25 copies of that picture I had of me and my face, which they were ecstatic about. And they wanted every single one of them. So I was like, woohoo, and then I remember it comes to this poster, and it just made me pause. And here's this poster of everybody involved in Star Wars. And there's Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and George Lucas and Gary Kurtz, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker. And I'm like, you seriously want me to add my scribble to this? Are you kidding me? And it just like, that was kind of my aha moment, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is insanity. Like, why would you want that? And so, and they were super nice, and we talked for a lot, and I told them some of the stories, because they just didn't know this part of the story at all. And so they were getting ready to leave, and Steve mentions to me, he's like, hey, you did pretty good with autographs today. And I was ecstatic. I remember I went out and bought a leather recliner. I was so happy, like, woohoo, it's my Jawa recliner, still sits in the living room,
Oh, excellent.
And but he's like, there's some money to be made doing this if you're interested in doing it. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever, and he's like, no, seriously, you can make some good money doing this. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, So they left, and so that was in October of 17. I want to say it was March of 2018. My phone rings and it's Steve, and I pick up the phone. He's like, "Hey, I was wondering if you wanted to do a Showmasters Comic Con in Birmingham, England." And I was like, "Yes." Like I didn't like, how much, like, do I have to pay my own way or anything? I just want to do this thing. Well, it ended up that they'd gotten a hold of Andrea Wickman Miller, and she was willing to go, and so they set this whole thing up. So here we were, these two previous Jawas were off to Europe to do this. So Andrea and I, we met at the airport. I hadn't seen her since 1979, I imagine, and we're off to Europe to sign autographs, and that was just like, it was kind of a crazy whirlwind. I want to say we did this thing in 3 or 4 days, and it was just insanity. So we left San Francisco and flew into whatever the closest airport to Birmingham is. I'm not sure which that is. And had a car waiting for us to take us to the hotel. And the hotel was way out in the middle of nowhere. And they got us our rooms. I think we got into the room at like midnight. And we had to be up at like 6 or 7 the next morning. And it was pretty rough. They didn't, they don't have air conditioning in some of these places over in Europe, and the hotel didn't have air conditioning. I don't think Andrea's room had a screen on the windows, so bugs were. It was just a mess, And so we get up the next morning, and they've got these buses for us to take, to the convention, and these people are climbing on this bus, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at them, and Andrea was freaking out because I think it was. I don't remember which series they were all a part of, but it was, she had watched the series, so she knew all these actors, and they take us to Birmingham, and we get off the bus, we go in our special entrance, and there's this barricaded off area, and it's all these fans had come, and they're watching us walk off the bus and into the hall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're here to see us. Like, look at all these people. And I wanted to go down like Rocky, woo, this big star now, right? So anyway, they put us in the green room first, which, I always thought it was green. I have no idea why they call it that, but it's not green. And we did our first day of autographs, and just had a lot of fun. Got to meet some people. I got to meet the twins from The Shining. We're sitting there. Simon Henderson was also there. He was a Jawa over in, I think he was Elstree Studios is where Simon Henderson was. So we're just having a good time, just rolling with the flow, and just, signing autographs. And, I remember, a little girl came up, and she'd drawn a picture of a Jawa and gave it to me. And it just, it just touched my heart. And it made me really appreciate, the fans, and like, how much, and everyone is a different story. I remember, one gentleman came up, and I asked him what he collected, and he said that he only collects from the first film. I was, oh, that's interesting. Why is that? And he said, well, it's the first and only film my dad ever took me to.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, wow, that's amazing, and I'm a part of that. And, so that's his connection with his father. And just every fan has a story of why why you want to meet the characters, why you want to meet, these individuals that worked on the film, and they're all unique, and so some of the questions, or statements that I get, like the first one is, "Oh, I thought you'd be shorter." And yeah, I was. I was a lot shorter when I was 5 years old, but now I happen to be probably the tallest Jawa out there. It's 6 foot tall. That's one of the questions. The other one I get is, what other films have I done? And none. I no aspirations of being an actor at any point in my life, and it was just right place, right time, 14 seconds of fame type of thing. But so that was just an absolute um, magical experience. Day one here in Birmingham, and so we finished up signing autographs for the day, and they put us all back on the buses and took us back to the hotel, and where all the actors were staying, and I went downstairs and grabbed a pint, and here's Mads Mikkelsen, and one of my daughters is just like enamored with Mads, the greatest actor ever, right? And so I'm like, hey, I'm Tim, worked on Star Wars, and we just started hitting it off, right? And I ended up taking a selfie with him. He was very gracious and did that. But we were just sitting there having a pint, watching soccer, and we ended up talking about our kids, and he told a really funny story about how his kids, just didn't really care about his acting career until he was in a Beyonce video, and then like, oh my gosh, Dad's really something.
Yeah.
So that kind of, it kind of made me realize that these are just normal people, right?
Right.
And so we ended up, we all kind of gathered out in the courtyard. It was an absolutely beautiful day. There was picnic tables out there, and kind of a funny story. I remember we were talking. I remember Billy Boyd was out there, and that guy's he's absolutely hilarious. So this is an all genre type show, and there's this guy sitting across from me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy looks familiar. But we're sitting here talking about, we're talking about working out, we're talking about family, and talking about just life, and I'm just like, sharing my life with him, and he's sharing his. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, oh my gosh, he looks so familiar, but I don't know who he is. So I excused myself to go to the restroom, and hit my Showmasters thing and going through to see who this is. Who am I talking to, right? And it was Ray Park. It was Darth Maul.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there like, I have no idea who this guy is. I'm like,
That's
oh man, like, you got to be kidding me, And so that was kind of a funny moment for me. But it was just absolutely wonderful show. Got to sit down and talk with Danny Glover, and he's just had an amazing career, and so many other people that were there, and it was just a really, really fun show. So that was the very first Comic-Con, and Andrea and I flew right back home. It was a super quick trip, and at that point I kind of vowed to myself, like, I am never doing that again. Like, here I got to go to Birmingham, England, and I didn't really get to experience it much.
Right.
We went around a little bit. That must have been the second evening or something. I don't really remember. Some of the fans took us around and went to a bunch of different pubs and stuff. But yeah, I definitely, at that point, I was like, okay, this is gonna turn into more fun than work. This isn't my business. This isn't what I do. So, I'm here to have fun. So that was my first experience. Long story. Thank you.
Great story. Fantastic, and I like all the intricate details. It opened up a lot of opportunities for you that you wouldn't have had if you weren't involved, and it's great how things just kind of come together like that. Now, was that a one and done for you, like you said, or did you end up kind of turning a new leaf and trying out some more Comic Cons?
So I've done a few. My next one was EmpireCon in LA in late 2019, which was a really good show. It was a lot of fun. I ended up going down there because it was in California. There was a lot of my family there. And it was held at the airport, which there's not a lot to do right there at the LAX. So that was kind of, we just used that as a jump off point for the family to go to Disneyland and stuff like that. A great show, though. Interesting fact, my wife came away with what nobody knew at the time was COVID.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that was very, very early in the virus coming to America, and she picked it up there at the convention. It was never diagnosed as COVID, but all the symptoms were there. The respiratory stuff lasted for weeks, kept kind of changing. It was really bizarre. And then later on, they announced this whole COVID thing. So, then COVID comes around, and that really messed up everything. Um, and then we didn't do a whole lot until I'm going to mix up some dates here, but I think it was 2023. I'm sorry, I should have wrote some of this down, but anyway, my next convention I did a little show down in Santa Cruz, which was a lot of fun. It was they had 5 of the Boba Fett's were down there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which I think is the most they'd ever gotten together at one time. Emily Swallow was down there. That was pretty cool. So did that little show. That was a lot of fun. Amy and I had a ball. And then I had the opportunity. I got to go to Power of the Force Con over in Cologne, Germany. And so I'm just like, I'm going to go and enjoy myself. And originally my wife was supposed to go, but she was getting ready to have knee surgery, and just walking wasn't really in the cards at the time. It was difficult for her. So she opted out, but she's like, look, go and have fun. And so I went in 3 or 4 days early for the show and ran around Cologne, Germany on a little scooter. They've got those rental electric scooters, and ripped around Cologne, and just ate food and drank the beer and talked to the people, and it was absolutely. I actually went and did CrossFit exercise, at a local gym in Cologne, and had just a ball doing stuff like that. And
So you were really able to experience it the right way this time.
yeah, I learned that lesson. I'm like, I'm not going to go to these foreign, way away places and not enjoy myself. And then after the show, I stuck around for a few more days and just walked around the city, just enjoyed myself, and just really had an amazing time. Left every penny I made in Germany. That was,
Oh,
it
it's
was a lot of fun.
experience.
Yeah. And then, so, this is kind of the platform that we've come up with that's going to work for me. We're being, not that I get lots of opportunities or offers, because, I make that pretty clear that, I'm just not open to do a show every weekend. Some of these folks do shows every weekends, and I'm just not willing to do that. I've had offers of, I can make bunches of money and just sign all these pictures, and I've refused them. For the simple fact is, I want to be able to interact with my fans, and I want to, sign those autographs and make it personal, hear their story, tell my story. I love telling my story. Um, so, I've stayed away from, doing big, um, it's not mail-ins, but autograph sections where I never get to meet anybody. And I do some mail-in on my if people contact me through the Jawa page, but I don't do a lot. I don't advertise them. And then I've also taken some opportunities to do volunteer time. Um, and earlier this year, it's I've done a few of them now. I think it's the third one I've done where we help a little local movie theater or theater company or something like that. And in this case, it was up in this little tiny town in Northern California called Etna, California, and they're restoring their old theater, and they use it, for many other things um, besides movies. That they use it as a little concert hall, and they use it, for town plays, and so it's definitely a multi-purpose type venue. And so I went up there, and it was May the 4th this year. And, I told him, I said, look, I said, I'll donate everything I make to this theater. Like, this is what I want to do. And I did a short run on my Jawa page that, all the proceeds I was going to give to that theater. And it was such a special time. It was funny. It's this Etna is a very, very small town. I don't remember the population, but I think it's like 2,000 people maybe.
Oh wow!
And they were having and it's very rural America, and it was rodeo weekend. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like seriously, like we're competing with the rodeo. Are you kidding me? Like this isn't going to be good, So I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to go up there. I'm going to have fun. And my best friend from the military lives up there. That's how I knew about it. And so it comes the day of the May the 4th, and they had a parade that day. It was for the rodeo, but we were in it. I walked around this little town in the parade, and that was a lot of fun. And inviting people to the show and stuff. And so the really cool thing about it was, and here I am, I'm in the foyer, and it's just like, gosh, it seemed like I was talking to people forever, just constant people coming in, and I signed a lot of autographs, but I wasn't keeping track, and stuff it was kind of chaos, but we were having fun, and so they started the film, and I went in, and I've got to go watch, and because I think this is a different funny story, but I did not see Star Wars on the big screen until 2018.
Wow!
Yeah, so just to sidetrack a little bit here, Death Valley didn't have a movie theater, and my parents at the time were split up, divorced, and my dad lived in Yellowstone National Park. So I would live the winters with my mom and go to school, and then I would spend the summers with my dad in Yellowstone National Park. So it was that transition, from school year to summer that the film came out, and I didn't get to see it. And so then by the time I came back from Yellowstone, it wasn't in theaters anymore, and then in the remake years, which was 96, I was overseas with the military. I missed it again,
Oh wow!
and so when I helped out this little Fox theater down here in Stockton, California, that was the first time I got to see it on big screen. So now every opportunity I get, if I can see it on the big screen, I'm going to.
Yeah.
And so back to Etna, California, in the Avery Theater. I went and watched the film, and then it was over, and we gave away some stuff at the end of the film, and people left and went on their way, and I got together with the promoters of this event, and they're like, this is the first time we've ever sold out our theater. Every seat was filled.
Wow.
And the stories of these people, like here they live in rural California, and they're farmers and ranchers, and just people of the earth, and yet they're fans of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And people drove down from Oregon to see me because they heard I was going to be there, and that's just it's just humbling, right? Like this universe is that gracious, and we ended up, it was just a record turnout, and they sold out of all our concessions, and we just had a wonderful night for them, and it was fantastic. And so these are the things I tended to lean more towards, currently, are these small venues and charity type stuff. And eventually, hopefully, I hope to do something big. I've actually been working with an agent, because 2027 is coming up, the 50 year.
Right.
And I made it clear to my wife, like, 2027 is going to be all Star Wars. I hate to tell you this, but like, I'm going to do something big. I don't know what it is, but I want to do something big in 2027, and it might be a few of them. I don't know, but it's just one of those things that original people involved with Star Wars, from 1977, we're becoming fewer and fewer.
Right.
Every year we lose one or two more, and it's just like, and then the people that are active, that list is very, very short now. For the, I think there's us few Jawas that do it on occasion. Fraser Diamond, I've worked with him. Simon Henderson, Andrea Wickman Miller, Joe Weber, myself. But I don't think anybody else is active. I've seen Tiffany and Melissa Kurtz autographs, but I don't know that they've done any Comic-Cons. So then really it comes down to, I think the only other one is Paul Blake, who was Guido.
Yeah, I actually just interviewed him recently. He was at a convention in Massachusetts.
Yeah, funny guy. Did he tell you about his tombstone?
No, I don't think he did.
Oh yeah, he says that his tombstone guaranteed will say Han shot first.
Oh, makes sense.
He's like, that is the one thing. Like, he's like, that is my legacy. Han shot first.
Classic character from from a classic franchise that you were a part of. So I mean, you deserve to be there for the 50th anniversary, and that's going to be special to kind of see what comes about. Because who knows what'll happen. I'm sure there'll be a lot, like you said, a lot of big events that year.
Yeah, it's and it's. I mean, there's already some interest around that, and I don't imagine we'll commit to anything until, I don't know, some point, probably late next year. But we're already working on 2026. I'm pretty sure I'll do a pretty good sized show next year. Kind of work that into my vacation budget. I only get so much a year, so I have to kind of pick and choose where I go. And I kind of have a funny thing. I work weekends, so any Comic-Con that I do, I have to take vacation for. So it's kind of it's a precious thing for my wife and I, our vacation, and so we kind of handpick. But There's some good stuff I think in the works coming up. I was hoping to be able to announce some today, but it just hasn't. I don't want to jinx it, you know.
Sure. No,
So
I mean, we look forward to, seeing the announcements, and we'll keep track and pay
yeah.
close attention. Rewinding to the film a little bit, how long was the filming? Was it all done in one day for you, or did you have a few days? And how long were the days for you?
I don't have really great answers on that, but it was 2 days. And I believe encompasses the first day of George Lucas and Gary Kurtz coming to the school and picking us. That's for sure a particular time, and I don't. It must have been that the next day or a following day was when we actually started working with them, because I know we had to get permission slips. They weren't just like, yeah, take them,
Yeah.
bring them back at the end of the day or whatever. you know.
Right.
But and then I remember there was actual 2 dedicated days to doing this. Um, I don't remember that they were terribly long days or anything like that, or grueling. And I don't remember if we had filming on both days, or they just kind of like set us up, set the scenes up, and then hauled us kids in, knocked it out. But I remember that carrying R2D2 was just insanity. Like, that took a lot of different shots. I think the canyon shots were a little bit easier because we really just didn't have to do anything but be kids. Um, but the filming of picking up R2D2 and carrying him up the hill to the sand crawler, um, that definitely took some work. That was probably almost a full day right there. So an interesting fact is, I remember setting R2D2 down, and we walked up on the stairs of a flatbed trailer.
Oh,
And I didn't like understand what we were doing, but the thing was is the sand crawler was painted glass mat attached to the camera. And so we couldn't see it. We didn't know it was there. And then that where we walked up onto the up the stairs onto the flatbed trailer must have been us walking up the stairs into the sand crawler. And I know they also had the prop in Tunisia that they built, but I think they had us do it just as possibly a secondary, shot if need be, or something. I'm not really sure exactly how that, but I remember doing that as a kid.
wow.
So to best answer your question, it was 2 days of filming, which also included getting fit for costumes.
And then once you grew a little older, at what age did you realize how big of a franchise it had become? And what was your family's input on that once they saw how big this was?
Well, I think we always knew, once it came out in theater, and that this was something very big. And then a few years later, they had Empire Strikes Back, and then Return of the Jedi. So it was really big during that time. And then we went into a huge drought, right? Like, it was a long time before
Yeah.
any other film came out. Um, and there was always the books and the comics, which I was never into. I've since gotten into those later, now knowing that they all tie together, right? Like if you want the full picture, you have to read the comics, you have to read the books, you have to watch the animated series. Like, I mean, they all play their own part. I remember that first time in Birmingham, I thought I knew Star Wars, and fans schooled me bad. And I remember coming home going, holy smokes, I need to study Star Wars. I thought I knew some stuff. And so, I think the best way to answer that was, I knew it was this big, which was big for a long, long time. But now, getting into the side of it, it's just it's just astronomical. It just goes on forever, right? Like there's always something new to be learned or talked about or something like that. And then with Disney paying $8 billion for it, like we're in this for the long haul. Like, you know, this is going to be something that I get to talk about with my, future grandkids, right? And like, so it's, I think it was, I always knew it was big. I just didn't know how big,
Right. Exactly.
right?
And putting
So,
aside your personal experiences with it and your obviously you were a part of it, just kind of turning into your inner fan, what were some of your favorite characters over the years from the Star Wars franchise?
but I mean, of course, I love the Jawas. You know, I have to, right?
Right.
But I will tell you, when Mandalorian brought them back, like that was one of my greatest days. I remember sitting here right here on my couch with my wife watching it, and the Jawas were there. And I had no idea. Like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
we're back, but as far as characters, I've always loved Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, he's just always been a great character to me. Um, he's loyal and smart and doing the right thing. In the animated series, I really got to like Ahsoka a lot.
Yep.
Great character. And it just keeps going. I mean, Chewbacca's amazing. And his story. Never much cared for Luke. I hate to say it, but kind of a whiner. you know. Um, but yeah, Obi Wan for sure. Ahsoka is amazing. Although the way she's kind of portrayed in the live action stuff, I don't. Her character's okay. Seems a little bitter. Um, but in Clone Wars, it was just fantastic, and um, I love the Bad Batch crew. Um, they're a great bunch of stormtroopers that I just truly enjoy. But my favorite's going to be Obi-Wan for sure.
And did you ever collect any of the collectibles or action figures over the years?
Collect, yeah. I was play hard. They're probably buried in the dirt somewhere in Death Valley
Okay.
type of kid. Like, now I've got a small collection. I collect, Jawas. I've been slowly working on rebuilding our scene with Legos, using the sand crawler and the 8 Jawas carrying R2D2. And then, anytime I can, I try and pick up, any Jawa type memorabilia that I come across. Whether it's the Hallmark ornaments or, a stuffed, I guess, animal, for lack of better terms. And stuff like that. I'll collect pretty much anything Jawa.
And as an iconic series, as it's been, or franchise, I should say, how important do you think that John Williams and the music of Star Wars was to the films?
Oh, I just the score brings that, it completes the movie, right? Like it's without it, I don't know that it'd be worth watching. But it's the buildup, it's the excitement, it's the fear. It helps that emotion out
Yeah,
through music. So you can't have one without the other.
sure.
You know.
And how can fans follow you? You said sometimes you do mail orders, that sort of thing. If a fan is looking for an autograph and can't make it to a convention.
Yeah, so my social media pages can be all found through Cool Jawa. That was a nickname. There's a whole other story. I don't know if we have time for that story, but I've kind of picked up the handle Cool Jawa. If you search that or Tim Donaldson, you'll find me either on Instagram or Facebook. Those are the two platforms that I use.
Okay. And what advice do you have for somebody that's maybe looking to get involved in the world of acting or wants to be a part of any of the films that are, coming out today?
Man, I don't know that I have any good advice. I mean, to be honest, I try and message Dave Filoni and John Favreau all the time, trying to be trying to be a cameo in there because they love cameos. Get me in as a cameo. But I I wish I had good advice for somebody like that. But my situation was so unique. Um, but like if you were gave somebody a choice, like, hey, if you got to be an extra in 14 seconds of film, and you knew my scene, like that would be the answer. Like, so many people have had extras in different films and different things, but like, mine just happened to be iconic. Like, I can talk to pretty much anybody that's ever seen Star Wars and tell them my scene. They're like, oh yeah, I know that scene, you know. But I don't really have any advice other than, if you do get the opportunity, um, to where you're in an arena that you can have interaction with fans, post production, such as what I do. Enjoy it. Listen to the stories, and listen to why people are a fan of you or your character. Um, and make that connection, because it's just like I've got so many of these stories that it's just, they're heartbreaking, right? Like, like, wow, that's amazing. So many young kids, when they first started watch that when they first started, they saw Star Wars, they were like, oh, the Jawa, that's a character I could be, you know.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, well, I couldn't be Luke, I wasn't tall enough, and
Right.
so I think that's where the Jawa was pretty relatable. But yeah, it's just, enjoy the post production. I think is if you do make it, enjoy that and appreciate who fans are and what they do, the sacrifices they make to come and see you. And that's just, it's what I cherish. Without fans, we wouldn't have any of it.
And in closing, what would you like to say to the fans of the franchise, the fans that have supported you over the years, and they're so passionate? What would you like to say to them?
Just that I appreciate every one of you, and without you, I wouldn't have the opportunity, and that's what means the most to me, and I hope that I get to meet every one of you someday, in some way. And if you happen to see a 6 foot tall guy walking around somewhere with a cool Jawa T-shirt, come up and ask, because I'm probably the only one.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been an honor to have you on hand here.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And I appreciate you having me on, and so much fun to tell the story. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. For the cool Jawa, Mr. Tim Donaldson, I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.